My farmer husband and his father mocked me for months in the old family language they believed I could never understand. At dinner, in the barn, after church, they called me weak, useless, and unfit for farm life. I smiled, poured their coffee, and kept my secret. But the night a storm trapped us inside the farmhouse, I heard them planning something far worse than insults. They were about to lose everything. And when I finally answered in their own language, my husband turned pale, his father froze, and no one at that table looked at me the same again. My name is Emily Carter Miller, and the first time I understood what my father-in-law really thought of me, I was standing in my own kitchen with a pot roast in my hands. I had been married to Caleb Miller for 11 days. 11 days on his family farm in northern Iowa. 11 days waking before sunrise, trying to learn the rhythm of a life that had existed long before me. The old white farmhouse, the red barn, the cornfields stretching toward the horizon, the gravel road that turned to mud after rain. All of it belonged to the Millers before it ever belonged to me. Caleb was a quiet man. Strong, tired, handsome in that weathered farmer way, with sunburned arms and blue eyes that always looked like they were carrying more than he said. When he asked me to marry him, he told me, "I don't have much softness in my life, Emily, but I'd like you in it." I believed him. What I did not understand was that softness was not welcomed in that house. Caleb's father, Walter Miller, lived in the smaller home across the lane. He was 71, sharp-eyed, proud, and hard as winter soil. His wife had died 6 years earlier, and from what I could tell, grief had not made him gentle. It had made him mean. On my first night at the farm, he looked me up and down and said, "So this is her." Not welcome. Not congratulations. Just, "So this is her." I smiled anyway, because that was how I had been raised. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Miller." Walter gave a dry laugh. Nice doesn't fix fences. Caleb heard him. Caleb said nothing. That should have warned me. But when you love someone, you sometimes explain away the first wound. You tell yourself people need time. You tell yourself old men are set in their ways. You tell yourself your husband is just tired. Then came that dinner. I had spent the whole afternoon cooking. Pot roast, potatoes, carrots, gravy, biscuits. Everything I thought a farm family would appreciate. Walter sat at the table like a judge. Caleb sat across from him, still in his work shirt, dust at his collar. Walter took one bite, chewed slowly, then turned to Caleb and spoke in the old family language. Pennsylvania Dutch. Rough, low, and familiar. She cooks like she's afraid of salt. Caleb lowered his head and gave a tired little laugh. I kept my face still. Walter glanced at me, certain I understood nothing. Then he added, "Pretty hands, empty head." The room seemed to shrink around me. I set the gravy boat on the table. My fingers stayed steady, but only because I forced them to. What Walter did not know, what Caleb did not know, was that my grandmother had spoken that same old dialect when I was a child. Grandma Miriam had been born into a Pennsylvania Dutch family in Ohio. She left that world when she married my grandfather, but she never fully left the language behind. She prayed in it, scolded in it, sang hymns in it while kneading bread. She used to tell me, "Emmy, language is a locked door, and one day someone may speak behind that door thinking you cannot enter." That night, I entered. And I said nothing. At first, I thought maybe it was one cruel joke. It wasn't. The jokes became a habit. In the barn, when I struggled to lift a feed sack, Walter muttered, "A city wife with paper arms." At church, when I brought lemon cake instead of shoofly pie, he leaned toward Caleb and said, "She doesn't even know what kind of family she married into." At the feed store, when I asked which mineral blocks we needed, he said, "Expensive decoration. That's what she is." Caleb heard almost every word. Sometimes he looked uncomfortable. Sometimes he told his father, "Pa, leave it." But he never said it like a husband defending his wife. He said it like a tired son begging a storm not to rain. That hurt more than Walter's insults, because Walter was cruel. But Caleb was silent. And silence, when someone you love is being humiliated, becomes its own kind of betrayal. Still, I kept my secret. Not because I was weak, because I was learning. A woman hears the truth when people believe she is too foolish to understand it. By the end of my first month on the farm, I knew Walter thought Caleb had married beneath him. I knew he blamed me for every moment Caleb spent away from the fields. I knew he believed women were useful only if they worked quietly, cooked perfectly, and never questioned a man. I also knew something else. The farm was in trouble. At first, it was only little things. A white envelope from the bank disappeared from the mailbox before Caleb got home. Walter stopped talking whenever I entered his kitchen. Caleb came in late one evening and sat at the table with his head in his hands, staring at a stack of bills. A black SUV appeared twice near the east pasture fence. When I asked about it, Caleb said, "Probably Russell Haynes." "Who's that?" "A land broker." The way he said the words made them sound dirty. "He's been buying up struggling farms," Caleb said. "Splitting them, selling pieces, pushing families out." "Is he interested in this place?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "He can be interested all he wants." That was all he said. But the next day, I saw Walter standing by the east field, speaking to a man in a black coat beside that same SUV. When Walter noticed me watching from the porch, he stopped talking. The man smiled at me from far away. Walter did not. That night at dinner, Walter was sharper than usual. I had made chicken and dumplings. He took one bite and said in English, "Too thick." Then, in Pennsylvania Dutch, he added, "She ruins food the same way she'll ruin this house." Caleb's fork stopped moving. I waited. Defend me, I thought. Just once. Caleb looked at his father and said, "Pa." That was all. Walter smirked. Something rose in my throat. Not tears. Words. Old words. Words my grandmother had taught me. I almost said, "I understand you." Instead, one small word escaped before I could stop it. Jinog. Enough. Walter's eyes snapped toward me. Caleb looked up. The kitchen went still. I forced a small laugh and reached for the water pitcher. "My grandmother used to say that," I said quickly. "I don't even know what it means. She said it when we made too much noise." Walter stared at me for 3 long seconds. Then he grunted and looked back at his plate. But after that, he watched me differently. Not with respect. With suspicion. The next week, the tension on the farm thickened. Caleb worked longer hours. Walter came over more often. The bank envelopes stopped arriving at our house altogether. Once, I found Caleb searching the counter. "Did you see any mail from First County Bank?" "No," I said. He looked toward the window, across the lane to Walter's house. His face darkened. But he did not go over there. That was Caleb's weakness. He could face a storm, a sick animal, a broken machine, a failing crop. But he could not face his father. One afternoon, I took a casserole dish back to Walter's house. His front door was not closed all the way. I lifted my hand to knock, but stopped when I heard a man's voice inside. "Russell Haynes." "I'm telling you," Russell said, "the East 40 solves the immediate problem." My hand froze on the porch rail. Walter answered in Pennsylvania Dutch. "Caleb will never agree. His mother loved that field." Russell's voice stayed smooth. "Then don't make it emotional. Make it necessary. The boy is stubborn. The boy is drowning. You know that. I know that. The bank knows that." My heart began to pound. Walter lowered his voice, but I still understood him. "If he sees the notices, he'll blame me for not telling him sooner." Russell replied, "Then get ahead of it. You still have some authority under the old family trust, don't you?" Walter said, "On some things." "Enough to start the paperwork?" There was a long pause. Then Walter said, "Maybe." I stepped back from the door before my knees could fail. The East 40. That was the field with the old oak tree. The field Caleb's mother had loved. The field where Caleb had proposed to me, awkward and nervous, holding a silver ring in his rough palm. Walter was thinking of selling it behind Caleb's back, and Russell Haynes was helping him. I drove into town the next morning without telling anyone. At the county records office, I asked to see public documents connected to the Miller farm. The clerk, Mrs. Donnelly, looked at me over her glasses. "You're Caleb's wife?" "Yes." "Walter know you're here?" "No." Her mouth tightened in a way that told me she understood more than she would say. For 2 hours, I read land records, trust amendments, parcel maps, and loan filings. I did not understand everything, but I understood enough. Walter could not sell the East 40 without Caleb's signature. But the farm did have a serious debt problem. Not impossible. Not fatal. But serious enough that fear could make a proud man do stupid things. The worst part was the mail. Several notices had been sent to Walter's address, because some old farm paperwork still listed his house as the secondary mailing location. Caleb had not seen everything. Walter had, and Russell knew exactly where to press. Before leaving, I made copies. Then I went to see Mrs. Granger. She was a widow from church, small, silver-haired, and sharper than most men gave her credit for. Her late husband had spent 30 years working with agricultural loans. She had watched me at church for weeks, watched Walter speak over me, watched Caleb fail to stop it. When I told her everything, she listened without interrupting. Then she said, "So they thought you were ignorant because you were quiet." I nodded. She poured tea into 2 cups. "Men often mistake quiet women for empty rooms," she said. "Then they're shocked when the room has been recording every word." I almost cried then, not because I was weak, but because someone finally saw me clearly. Mrs. Granger helped me organize the documents. She called her nephew, an attorney in Des Moines, who confirmed what the records showed. Walter could not legally push the sale through without Caleb. If Russell tried to use old authority from the trust, it could be challenged. "But Caleb needs to act quickly," the attorney said through the phone. "And he needs the full truth." The full truth. That was the part I feared most. Not the debt. Not Russell. Not even Walter. I feared looking my husband in the eye and telling him I had understood every cruel word he had allowed. The storm came 3 nights later. Rain hammered the windows. Wind bent the trees beside the house. Caleb came in soaked to the skin, mud on his jeans, blood on one knuckle. "Fence is down near the creek," he said. 2 heifers missing. Before I could answer, Walter entered behind him without knocking. "That fence should have been replaced last spring," he snapped. Caleb threw his wet hat onto a chair. "With what money, Pa?" Walter's face went rigid. That was when headlights swept across the kitchen wall. A black SUV pulled into the driveway. Caleb stared through the rain-streaked window. "No," he said quietly. Russell Haynes stepped onto our porch carrying a leather folder. Walter would not meet Caleb's eyes. The knock came. No one moved. So I opened the door. Russell smiled like a man arriving at exactly the moment he had planned. "Evening," he said. "Bad night. Figured it might be a good time to talk through options." Caleb looked at his father. "You called him?" Walter said. "We need to be practical." Russell set his folder on my kitchen table without being invited. "There's no shame in restructuring," he said. "No shame in letting go of one piece to save the whole." Caleb's voice went cold. "What piece?" Russell opened the folder. "The East 40. For a second, Caleb looked like a little boy. Not angry. Wounded. "My mother's field?" Walter said. "Your mother is gone." The words hit the room harder than the thunder. Caleb stepped back. Russell slid papers forward. "This can relieve immediate pressure. With the right signatures, we can move quickly." I stood by the stove, my folder of copies hidden beneath a dish towel. Walter turned toward Caleb and spoke in Pennsylvania Dutch, fast and harsh. "Make him sign before that little wife starts crying. She knows nothing. She is only in the way." Caleb closed his eyes. Maybe from pain. Maybe from shame. Maybe because, even then, he was not going to defend me. So I finally did it myself. In the same old dialect, in a voice so calm it surprised even me, I said, "No, Walter, I am not in the way. I have been standing here the whole time." The room went silent. The rain kept striking the windows, but inside the kitchen, no one seemed to breathe. Walter's mouth opened. Caleb turned slowly toward me. Russell frowned. "What did she say?" I looked at my husband first. "I understood every word," I said in English. "Every dinner, every insult in the barn, every joke at church. Every time your father called me weak, useless, decorative, foolish. And every time you heard him and chose silence. Caleb's face strained. Emily. I lifted one hand. Not yet. Then I looked at Walter. My grandmother taught me Pennsylvania Dutch. She also taught me that people reveal their souls when they think no one important is listening. Walter gripped the back of a chair. You lied. No, I said. I listened. Then I pulled the folder from beneath the towel and laid the copies on the table. And I heard much more than insults. Russell's expression changed. That was when I knew I had him. The East 40 cannot be sold without Caleb's signature, I said. The trust was amended after Margaret died. Walter does not have sole authority. The debt is real, but the deadline is Monday, not tomorrow. There are restructuring options. There are relief programs because of the flood damage near the creek. And there are notices Caleb never received because they were sent to Walter's address. Caleb turned to his father. You hid bank letters from me? Walter's face crumpled for a second, but pride pulled it back into hardness. I was trying to save the farm. No, I said. You were trying to save your control. Russell began gathering his papers. This is clearly a family disagreement. I stepped closer. No, this is a land broker pressuring an elderly man to use outdated trust authority to force a sale. And if you file anything without proper consent, the county attorney and our lawyer in Des Moines will hear about it. Russell looked at Walter. Walter looked at the floor. Then Russell closed his folder. I'll see myself out. The door shut behind him. The storm swallowed his engine as he drove away. For a long moment, the three of us stood in that kitchen with the truth laid out between us. Walter sat down first. He suddenly looked old. Not powerful. Old. I didn't know how to tell him, he muttered. Caleb's voice broke. So you were going to sell Mom's field? I was trying to keep us from losing everything. You almost made me sign away the only part of this farm that still feels like her. Walter said nothing. Then Caleb looked at me. The shame in his eyes was almost too heavy to watch. You understood us the whole time? Yes. Why didn't you say anything? My answer came quietly. At first, because I was hurt. Then because I wanted to know who you were when you thought I couldn't understand. And then because I was afraid the answer was exactly what I was hearing. He flinched. Good. Some truths should hurt. He took one step toward me. I'm sorry. I shook my head. Don't apologize because you were caught. Apologize when you understand. His eyes filled. I let him humiliate you, he said. Because standing up to him scared me more than hurting you. That was the first brave thing Caleb said that night. Walter whispered in Pennsylvania Dutch, I thought she didn't belong here. I answered in the same language. I know. He closed his eyes. Then I said in English, and I still tried to save your home. No one slept much. By morning, the storm had passed. The fields were soaked, branches scattered across the yard, the creek swollen and brown. Caleb found the missing heifers caught near the lower fence. I went with him. For once, he did not tell me to stay inside. For once, he asked for my help. On Monday, Caleb and I went to the bank together. Not Caleb and Walter. Caleb and me. We brought the records, the notices, the loan documents, and the relief applications Mrs. Granger had helped prepare. The bank did not erase the debt, but they agreed to restructure it. The attorney sent a letter warning Russell Haynes not to pursue any sale without proper authority. The farm was not magically saved in one morning. Real life rarely works that way. But we had a path. And this time, no one was hiding the map. Walter did not speak to me for several days. When he came for dinner, he ate quietly. No hidden language. No cruel jokes. No smirk across the table. The silence felt different now. Before, it had been a weapon. Now, it was shame. Caleb changed slowly, then deliberately. When Walter criticized the way I stacked jars in the pantry, Caleb said, Don't speak to my wife like that. Walter looked stunned. So did I. When I asked a question about seed costs, Caleb answered seriously instead of brushing me aside. When bank papers came, he put them on the kitchen table and said, Will you look at these with me? One evening, I found him standing by the East 40, near the old oak tree. The sunset made the field look gold. My mother used to sit here, he said, when Pa got too hard to live with. I stood beside him. She sounds wise. She was, he swallowed. I think she would have liked you. I did not answer right away. Then I said, would she have liked how you treated me? His eyes lowered. No. That was enough for that moment. Forgiveness is not a switch. It is a road. And if someone wants to be forgiven, they have to walk it without demanding that you hurry. The harvest festival came 3 weeks later at the church grounds. I almost stayed home, but Caleb asked me to come. Asked. Not expected. Not assumed. Asked. Near the end of the evening, after the pie auction and raffle, Caleb walked onto the small wooden stage beside the fellowship hall. Walter stood at the back of the crowd, arms crossed. Caleb took the microphone. My family has farmed this land for generations, he said. Most of you know that. What most of you don't know is that this year, we nearly lost part of it. The crowd quieted. We didn't save it because I was strong enough. We didn't save it because my father was stubborn enough. We saved it because my wife, Emily, was paying attention when the rest of us were too proud to listen. People turned toward me. My face burned. Caleb's voice shook. She came into my home and was treated like an outsider. She was mocked in a language we thought she could not understand. And when she had every reason to walk away, she chose to help save the farm anyway. Walter stared at the ground. Caleb looked directly at me. That is not weakness. That is character. And I'm ashamed it took me so long to see it. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mrs. Granger started clapping. Others joined. The sound rose around me, warm and overwhelming. Then Walter stepped forward. He took the microphone from Caleb with hands that were not as steady as usual. I judged my daughter-in-law wrongly, he said. His voice was rough. I spoke shamefully. I thought because my ways were old, they were right. But old pride is still pride. He turned to me. Then, in Pennsylvania Dutch, he said, "Forgive me, daughter." Most people did not understand the words, but they understood the tears in his eyes. I walked to the stage. I looked at Walter. I looked at Caleb. Then I answered in the same old language my grandmother had given me. I will not forget, but I am willing to begin again. That was the truth. Not a perfect ending. A beginning. The farm kept demanding work. Machines still broke. Bills still arrived. Rain still came on the wrong days. Walter still had sharp edges, but he learned to put them away more often. Caleb learned that love is not proven only in fields and barns, but also at dinner tables, in hard conversations, and in the courage to say, "That's enough." As for me, I stopped trying to earn a place I had already deserved. I cooked because I wanted to, not because I was being tested. I helped with papers because I was capable, not because I needed approval. And when Walter slipped into the old language, it was no longer to hide cruelty. Sometimes it was to teach me a recipe. Sometimes it was to remember his wife. Sometimes it was simply to say, awkwardly, "Thank you." One spring morning, Caleb planted wildflowers near the East 40, beneath the old oak tree. "For Mom," he said. Then he looked at me. "And for you." I took his hand. "You almost lost this field," I said. He squeezed my fingers. "No," he answered. "I almost lost more than that." For the first time, I believed he fully understood. My husband and father-in-law thought their language made me powerless. They thought their words disappeared because I did not answer. They thought silence meant ignorance. They were wrong. I heard every insult. I heard every secret. I heard the fear behind the pride. And when the time came, I did not answer with revenge. I answered with truth. That truth saved the farm. It saved my marriage from becoming a quiet prison. And maybe, in some painful, unexpected way, it saved Walter too. So if you have ever been underestimated because you were quiet, kind, patient, or new in a place where others thought they had the right to decide your worth, remember this. You do not have to shout to be strong. You do not have to be cruel to be powerful. And you do not have to prove yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. But when the moment comes to speak, speak clearly. Because sometimes the strongest woman in the room is not the loudest one. Sometimes she is the one who has been listening all along.